state of college basketball as it pertains to the transfer portal. You've seen his quotes. They are new quotes, so it gives me a new hook to talk about this. But these are things that he has said before. Okay. One thing he says, and I do think this is true on some level, he says, everybody used to complain about the one-and-done rule. Because it's all these guys, they come to college, they come to your campus, they're barely there, they're gone. Like, what is even the point? And the point John makes is, like, that is what the transfer portal is doing now. It's just at the other end of the spectrum. Like, Hunter Dickinson is going to be probably I don't know. He might just exhaust his eligibility forever. But you get the point. Like, a lot of these big-time transfers that are going to shape college basketball this upcoming season, they're going to be one-and-dones on their campus. They transfer to a big school lured by NIL money, and they're just going to be there for 1 year. So why, if one-and-dones were the devil of college athletics, a mockery of academic institutions, well, then how is this not the same thing? On that point, I actually see where he's coming from. Like, if you had a problem with people only spending 1 year on campus, well, these transfers are, in many cases, spending just 1 year on their next campus. I get that. Where I start to roll my eyes is when he begins to speak on the dangers of the current state of college basketball. And by dangers, what he means is it is actually a health risk dangerous for 18-year-old freshmen to be asked to compete, in some cases, against 25-year-olds, 26-year-olds, 27-year-olds. Now, you could take it to the extreme and say, look at DeAndre Williams. He's 27 years old, and he's going to be playing against an 18-year-old. But, there's only one DeAndre Williams. You play most college basketball teams. You're not really playing against 27-year-olds and 26-year-olds and 25-year-olds. Those rosters exist. Those players are some places, either because they went to prep school or just was behind with their class, or maybe they got injured, they got some redshirt years, or they got the extra COVID year. We are operating in a world where there are older than normal college basketball players all over this country. But the idea that every game you play, you're playing 25-year-olds, that's just not true.
Not true.
Okay. Either way, let's take his argument at its extreme, that it's dangerous, that John Calipari, Hall of Fame coach, thinks it's, quote, dangerous for 18-year-olds to be playing against 27-year-olds, and we should address it. And his suggestion is you get 5 years to play 4 seasons, and that is it. That's the rule. You can't play 2 years, sit out 3 years, come back, play another year, sit out a year, and now you're 27 years old playing college basketball. You enroll at a university, you got 5 years to play 4 seasons, and that is that. Honestly, I don't even care. Put that in front of me and say, you okay with it? I'd be like, whatever, it's fine.
Sure.
I don't care. All right? I'm only interested in the argument, the logic connected to it. Because, again, here's his suggestion. When you take an 18-year-old young man, he'd say kid, but they're not kids, they're young men. When you take an 18-year-old young man and put him in a competition, an athletic competition between 25, 26, 27-year-olds, physically, they are at an incredible disadvantage, and it is dangerous to ask him to do that. He may or may not be right. Let's just set that aside, though, because here's the problem when this argument comes from this guy. His entire legacy is built on taking 19-year-olds and throwing them in the NBA to play against 28-year-olds and 29-year-olds and 30-year-olds and 35-year-olds and big grown men. That's his entire model of success, maybe not dating all the way back to UMass and Memphis, but certainly at Kentucky.
Right.
His entire the thing he bragged about more than anything, all those years when he was at the tip top of the sport, was I can take these 18-year-olds, turn them into 19-year-old lottery picks, and then they're off making millions. And playing against 30-year-olds.
Yep.
You worried about them? Health concern? Dangerous for 18-year-olds to play against 26-year-olds, but not dangerous for 19-year-olds to play against 27-year-olds? What is the difference?
There's not.
No, of course not. He brags about his 19-year-olds playing in the NBA, but is worried about his 18-year-olds having to play in college against 25-year-olds. Logically, it makes no sense.
Right.
But he always has a motive, any argument he makes. So what's his motive here? That model that he used to win a national championship, go to Final Fours, get into the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, it's not an effective model anymore.
That's right.
because of
Everybody
the one-time
wants to be
transfer
old,
waiver, and because of the extra COVID year, it's not an effective model anymore. Because once upon a time, yes, you could take transfers, but if you took them, with few exceptions, yeah, they had to sit out a year. So you ain't going to have them for 2 years. And coaches, in many cases, were like, I ain't taking somebody now, bringing them on campus, and I don't even get to play them for 2 years. Some coaches would and did so successfully. But a lot of coaches were like, that's not the way to do this. So you're in the SEC. You're John Calipari. You're at Kentucky. And in a different era, pre-NIL and pre-one-time transfer waiver, what's Tennessee doing? What's Arkansas doing? What's Alabama doing? How are these schools, Florida, how are they building their basketball programs, their rosters? How are they doing it? Recruiting high school players for the most part. How are you building your roster? Recruiting high school players. At Kentucky, you're getting better high school players
the best ones,
than the high school players, literally in many cases, anybody else in the country is getting, but in almost all cases, better than anybody else in your league is getting. So you look at Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Tennessee, any of these schools, they are trying to build with high school players. Bring in the best they can get. Maybe some of them are one and dones. Most of them aren't. Develop them over years. This is the way we're building our program. All over the country, that's the way programs are building their country. All over the country, this is the way programs are building their rosters. They're, at this time, taking the best high school players they can get, but they're not as good as the best high school players Kentucky can get. Advantage John Calipari. Now the world's changed. Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, they're not building through high schools anymore. John still is trying to. He's still taking his 5-star freshmen. That's his roster. But these schools he's now competing against, they're not operating in that world anymore. Yeah, they'll take the 1 5-star, maybe 2, maybe take a guy ranked 55th. But you know what they're loading up on every single year? Grad transfers, because I can get them eligible immediately. Traditional transfers, because I can get them eligible immediately. And, the days of, well, yeah, coach, I would be interested in your program, but I'm really comfortable with this mid-major. I love my coach. I love my teammates. I'm just going to stay here. That's done, because now you know what you can do. I understand. You like it where you're at. Would you like $300,000? Come play for me. Mid-major coach, can't compete with that. So where are you going? Going where the money is. So why does John Calipari really have a problem with the one-time transfer waiver and the way that it is being utilized? Because every year now, he's still got his 5-star freshman. This guy has never stopped recruiting at a high level.
Right.
Every year now, he's still got his 5-star freshman. But he's not competing against other teams loaded up with 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds. He's competing with other programs that are loading up on 22-year-olds and 23-year-olds and 24-year-olds. And you might have the more talented NBA prospects, but they got the players that are better equipped to win in college basketball right now. That's why, at least in part, Kentucky hadn't been to a Final Four since 2015. It's why, at least in part, people are starting to question, in Kentucky, John Calipari's effectiveness at this age, at this point in his career, of actually running a top-shelf men's basketball program. Nobody questions whether he can still recruit the best high school players in the country. He's doing it every year. But is that a recipe for success? Doesn't look like it anymore. So that's the motivation behind all this other stuff.